And a good day to you, Explorer Nation. John Lynskey coming to you from a fall-like Macon, Georgia day up here. Very nice, very nice. And this is episode 2, season 3, actually part 2, with the illustrious Paul Kumer, history teacher, English teacher, explorer extraordinaire, class of '01. And Paulie, welcome back. Last week was great.
Thanks for having me. Last week was awesome. Lots of great memories, and the drive home, they just kept flooding back, and 42 minutes, obviously not enough time.
Yes, and so we had a great time revisiting your experiences as a student and all that. But we left off in one of the more intriguing things, the way some of us got hired at Columbus. It's pretty remarkable. And your hiring is quite something. I mean, I was hired over a payphone. Eric Pino was hired in a hot tub. I believe George Flatus was hired in a bar. You were hired in the hallway of Columbus High School by Brother Patrick McNamara, a great man whom you had never met.
No.
And you're about to head back out to California to be Jack Kerouac's Dharma bum. And you get home and there's a voice message waiting for you offering you employment at Columbus High School. So pick it up from there, Paul. You think you're leaving and you got a job offer.
Yeah, so obviously I take the job offer. Never really interviewed, but had conversations. And as I said last time, they gave me enough time to go to the store, a couple of days, pick up shoes, socks, shirt, tie, the essentials for being a professional. And what is that, August 2005, I start teaching. They gave me a box of chalk and my classroom keys, no book. We were still kind of figuring out what books were going to end up in what classes. And I was teaching, or I was told I was teaching freshman religion and freshman intensive reading for the once known Phase 2 crew.
Hey, Paul, I got to ask you, did Brother Patrick tell you were going to be teaching religion, or did it just, oh, by the way, you're teaching religion?
So at one point, he asked me for my transcripts from college, and he noticed that I had taken 3 religion courses. And I said, well, brother, it's a Catholic university. It's required that you take 3 religion courses. And he said, that's good enough. And I think if there was ever a phrase that described my 16 years here at Columbus, it's been good enough.
That's all we strive for, Paul, is good enough.
Look, we don't. This is a marathon. We don't want to overexert ourselves. Definitely, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So definitely want to overexert ourselves. Every year add a little something. And the funny thing was, heading into that August of 2005, I was working as a bartender, and I was serving tables at a restaurant, and some of my less reputable friends in that particular industry, and there are quite a few.
Yeah.
I told them, oh, look, I'm cutting down my hours. I'm going to be working full time somewhere else. And they're like, well, were you working at another spot? I go, yeah, it's another spot. It's a different place altogether. And eventually I got around to telling them I was going to be teaching high school. And they said, oh, well, that's pretty interesting. What are you going to be teaching? And I said, well, I'm going to be teaching freshman religion. And I kind of softly said that under my breath. They wanted me to repeat it. So I did, and they fell out of their seats. And they couldn't believe, again, there was a different person. I was a different person. I was younger.
Yeah.
I don't know. You learn, you grow.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, I'm sure my students today can envision me as a religion teacher. My friends now can't. My friends then couldn't. And it was fun. It was an enjoyable experience to teach religion. Look, I grew up at a Catholic school, and obviously I went to school here, and I had a foundation. I was really lucky. I was never asked really important questions, to be honest with you. That was my biggest concern. That was my fear. I was going to be asked a question, and before you know it, in 2005, there's the great, Lutheran uprising of the 21st century by accident, by complete dumb luck. But it didn't happen. We avoided all of that. And, the reading class was also interesting. I didn't know what I was doing. We spent.
How could you know what you were doing?
And I spent the first 4 weeks without a book, and we're supposed to read.
And these guys can't read, right?
So it was a match made in heaven. It was great. So the first class, we just kind of looked at each other to see who was going to make the first move, and there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of growth, mostly on my end.
Yeah.
It was great though is a lot of those boys, hell, they're 30 years old now, and despite my efforts, they've grown up to be successful individuals. They own businesses. They run the finance department of mortgage banks and doing things I can never do, and spell words I can never spell. And, those are the guys I stay in probably the most contact with. And, that seems to be the case with most of the guys that I've taught over the years, and just over the summer, I was up in DC taking in the sites with the kids and met up with a graduate. I don't even know what year it was, but Cameron Candela.
Oh, and, yeah.
His other brother was here as well, Connor. So we caught up, we had lunch. And then back in the spring, I had dinner with 3 boys who I never taught, but I was the moderator for the MUN club.
Okay.
So George Pita, Delilah's son, Chris Miranda, and Zach Gonzalez, all 3 of them lawyers, which is good for me. I need those guys at times. And, what's funny there was we're having dinner and they start doing the math and they start realizing, wait, you graduated 01, that makes you 38. Wait, we graduated whatever year it was, we're 31. And they start doing the math when I was their moderator. I was 24, and Brother Pat, again, loved the guy, but he thought it was a good idea that I took 8 guys by myself at the age of 24 to New York City for MUN.
No.
These guys were 16, 17 years of age. So we're at dinner and they're looking at me and they're going, wait, I couldn't even get myself dressed in the morning at 24. How did you manage to take care of the 8 of us? And I was like, I did it. I just acted like I belonged and it worked. And those were some interesting times because we're on one trip in DC. Actually, that was the first trip. We're in DC. We're taking the metro down toward, I think it was Foggy Bottom, because we're right outside of the Watergate.
Yeah, okay.
And as we're getting off the metro, not all of us made it off.
Oh.
Four students were on the platform. I was on the train with the other 4, and we're speeding down the line. And I just look out the back window and I said, "This is how this happens. This is how I lose a career that I wasn't even sure I had at the time." And another time, I guess it was the next year, we're over at the UN building. It's the last day, and Matt LaRoz, and anyone who's listening to this who knows Matt LaRoz understands how this would happen. He decides, and again, I wasn't doing a very good job as the moderator. I didn't frisk the boys. He took the cord that connected the handheld of the phone to the base of the phone from the hotel. He took that, he snuck it in his pocket. And
any reason why?
Oh yeah, there was a reason.
Oh, okay.
He had a reason. So we're in the UN building, and I just noticed there was some activity. I wasn't sure what the activity was or why it was happening, but there were men that were obviously specially trained, and they were physically imposing in suits, talking into their wrists.
Oh boy.
And they're swarming around Matt LaRoz, unbeknownst to him, because he has the cord wrapped around his ear.
Of course he does.
And he starts talking into his wrist, holding onto his ear, saying God knows what. And, he had learned a few phrases in Russian, mostly nonsense. So he's speaking to him like, what's going to happen? So they surrounded him. They literally picked him up and escorted him out of the UN building. And I'm following him. No, wait, stop. So none of this got back to Brother Pat, luckily, until now. If he hears this.
Full disclosure. Yeah, I think statute of limitations have expired.
It's about 15 years.
Yeah.
LaRoz was also the same guy. We were in DC, and it was nighttime, and we were leaving Fridays. We were having dinner. We were heading back to our hotel. And the boys had a bet regarding, who can handle the cold more than the other guys.
Oh boy.
So he takes off his shirt, his tie, his jacket, hands it to someone, and he starts walking through the streets of DC shirtless.
Did he have his trousers on?
He had his trousers on.
All right.
Okay. Grunting. So I'm paying the bill, and I just see this like ape-like human cross this window, and he's bolting it. He's just booking it for the hotel. So I'm paying, and I go, all right, guys, we got to go. So we're chasing LaRoz through the streets of DC. He's going through, different parks and squares. And this poor lady, she's at the corner. She's on the phone talking to her husband, I would assume, checking in, making sure that everything is safe. He runs by her, and all you hear her say is, "Oh, God." So those early years of my career were very much different. And, those were the few times I was able to hang out with the smart kids. And my students, those first 8 years here, not necessarily the smart kids, but they kept their clothes on. So it was
yeah. The Phase 2 Nation, they were always so much fun to teach because people say, well, they're not as smart. Well, A, they had great common sense. And B, they have the highest self-esteem of anybody I've ever met. Okay?
Oh,
yeah. They can do anything. Phase 2 kids and fat offensive linemen have the highest self-esteem I've ever been around. Offensive linemen always want to take their shirts off in public. I mean, that's just how it is. And so dealing with those guys, listen, you're trying to teach them to read without a book. Okay, you do the best you can.
And we did. And those Phase 2 kids. So here's, back when I was a student here, I was never a Phase 2 guy, but I was given a Phase 2 crew T-shirt. Again, another one of those great artifacts that means a lot to me. And then I come back and I'm teaching Phase 2, and it was an honor, right? It was a great honor to be teaching and working with those guys. And there's some actually right outside my classroom.
Yes.
Yeah. So in those early years, I had a great kind of 1-2 punch teaching Phase 2 English with Juan Moscoso. He really was, the first guy here on campus that took me under his wing. And there are some stories that are going to have to stay off the podcast from those early years. But, he had the Phase 2 freshmen, I had the Phase 2 sophomores, and we just were rolling with these guys. And we saw great success and incredible improvement where, by the time they got into Chacon's junior phase 2 class, and then eventually Scholar's senior phase 2 class, they had themselves quite an education, and we were able to get them to write their names. Big success.
Total six. They learned all 26 letters in the alphabet. What more do you want? Sometimes actually in order.
And they knew there was an uppercase or lowercase of each.
Listen, you're living the dream right there.
Yeah.
Paul, and I've always felt that the English department is one of the finest. You've had the privilege of being in two of the finest departments at Columbus High School, the history department and the English department. Great tradition in both. The Fred Panzers of the world, the Brother Eugenes of the Mike Deans of the world. Mm-hmm. Keith Crossman has done an amazing job. The history department speaks for itself. And so let me just ask you, what do you enjoy about teaching English? I mean, football player and all that. I know you like poetry. Mm-hmm. What is it like? It's something I always wanted to do. It's one of the few things I never got to do at Columbus. I always wanted to teach English. Never got the opportunity. How do you teach poetry to teenage boys?
Well, I find things that I go out of my way, and I was very deliberate to make sure that I help them reconceptualize what poetry was, right? Roses are red, violets are blue. And one of my favorite poets is actually Walt Whitman.
Okay.
And, when I taught junior English, that's where we would teach American literature, and you had like a small little excerpt from, I think it was Song of Myself. And I looked at the boys. I said, "This aggression will not stand, right? We can't have this." So I brought out my big text of Walt Whitman, and I made photocopies. I guess nowadays I would have taken pictures with the iPad, and I just gave it to them. I said, "Look, let's read it." There was no instruction on my end. There was no, this is how you're supposed to do this. And then I shut up, and I said, "What do you guys think?" And whether I'm teaching history or I'm teaching English or that 1 year I taught religion, my guiding principle for teaching was treat it like a first date. No girl ever went home after a date and said, "God, that was terrible. All he did was listen, and I did all the talking." And no student, at least not here at Columbus, no student is going to leave a class and say, "Geez, all the teacher wanted was to hear what I had to say and kept encouraging me to express my thoughts."
Yeah.
So I teach every class. I approach every class like a first date. Obviously different circumstances, but the same guiding principle.
Yeah.
And they would read, and, they'd mispronounce words, and they, miss out on different references and allusions and all of that good stuff. But, I never made them feel as though they couldn't do it or, they were doing it wrong. Just read, right? And my whole thing was just expose them to as much as possible, right? And when I taught American literature, I would just mention Allen Ginsberg. And I can't read, Kaddish or Howl in class, but I can mention. I can mention. Allen Ginsberg. Now, what they did with that information was entirely up to them. And if they came back to class the next day and said, "Wow, sir, that's a poem." Yeah, that's a poem.
That is a poem too. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and not only is that a poem, that's history. You're talking about what we're allowed to say, what we're allowed to publish. And oh, by the way, that's Leave It to Beaver era, if you will, right? This is very, conformist America, and here's this, wild-eyed, bushy beard kid from New York.
Madman.
Yeah. Madman, absolutely. So there was no real science or rhyme or reason to how I did it. It was very instinctive and very intuitive, and I let the boys kind of dictate where it went. I kind of set parameters and kind of pulled them and pushed them in different directions, and encouraged them to not be intellectually lazy. And I got a lot of that, I think, from, like you mentioned, some of the greats within the department: Panzer, Brother Eugene, even Mr. Crossman. Actually, those were the only 3 English teachers I had here.
Yeah.
And just engaging in that discourse, right? Reading something, dealing with the material, and sparking conversation. And I told the boys then, and I tell my students now, as we get ready for, preparing for an AP exam, you may not learn the history, but you're going to learn how to BS your way through it. And there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of practicality in developing that skill. And the boys here at Columbus don't need me for that. They come very well prepared and equipped with those skills. So
you just refine them a little bit.
Well, you know what I do? I teach them a couple fancy words, some nice $20 words, some SAT words, and
oh Lord,
they sound pretty, right? They speak the English good.
They speak it really good. Yeah. Paul, I always got a kick that your son Elliot, his first name is spelled as T.S. Eliot, spelled his last name, and to me, that's a very cool little thing, because I love T.S. Eliot, and obviously anybody that feels strongly enough to name his son like that, you're into what you're doing.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Was not when we found out, my wife and I found out that we were having a boy for the first one, and then obviously we had a boy on the second one, I had no interest in naming, my boys after me. Now Elliot, his middle name happens to be Paul, because it was time to sign the birth certificate. We had no idea. We're like, just screw it, give him the name Paul, right? But there was thought put in behind Elliot.
Yeah.
Wasteland, one of my all-time favorite poems. And I would, with the Phase 3 juniors, I would sit there and I would take 3 weeks going through every line, reference, Greek translation, and just we went to war with that poem with those boys. And look, they may never look at it again, but they can say they read it and they understood it. And it was for that 3-week period, it was a college lit class on T.S. Eliot. And, again, one of my favorite poems, just because of how esoteric it is. And
yeah,
he really challenges you to be a thinker, to get through the poem. And he's responding to this ever-changing dynamic, not only in America, but more importantly, just civilization, right? Things have been rocked to its core, and the future's bleak. So, yeah, maybe naming my firstborn Elliot and thinking of the Wasteland while doing it may not have been the best idea.
Listen, man, it worked out. It
worked out, and he's got himself a story to tell, and one day maybe he'll sit down with me, we'll read The Wasteland. Look, I'm an unabashed nerd. Some might even say a dork. Okay, I'm kind of a dork. When he was a child, when he was a baby, actually, a month old, and I had the night watch, and I feed him and put him to bed. As the wife was tucked in her slumber, I'd take out my copy of Moby Dick and I would read it to him.
Yeah.
And I mean, he doesn't know what the hell's going on with Moby Dick, but it was just that exposure, right? No different than the education that he and my other boy are getting at home with music. I mean, we have music playing constantly throughout the house. First thing I do in the morning when I wake them up, gently and nicely, and turn the lights on, we turn on the Alexa in their room, and we kind of have a rotation. Mondays are always Beatles in the morning, and the first song in that playlist is "Here Comes the Sun."
Breakfast with the Beatles. Yeah.
Breakfast with the Beatles. Tuesdays they elect for jazz, so we've got a lot of Charlie Parker that goes playing in the morning there, and the week goes on, and by Friday there's only one band that they want to listen to on a Friday morning as they get ready for school, and that's Led Zeppelin.
A whole lot of love to start.
A whole lot of love.
Yes,
and Immigrant Song and Kashmir, and so when Elliot was in pre-K4, he had just started at St. Louis Covenant, nice proper parochial school. It's day one, and they're getting to know one another, and they're sitting in a little circle, and the question is, name, give us your name and your favorite song. So Johnny stands up, he says Baby Shark. Sarah stands up and says, I don't know, Mariana Lamb.
Barry, yeah.
And it's Elliot's turn. He stands up, and he's the introvert of my two boys.
Okay.
He says, my name's Elliot. Favorite song. His favorite song is not a Led Zeppelin song. His favorite song is Smoke on the Water.
Deep Purple.
Deep Purple. Absolutely.
Hey, greatest intro chords of all time.
Very simple, right? Straightforward. And he says, Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, favorite band, Led Zeppelin. And he starts playing air guitar, which didn't get from me. I don't know where he got that from. I'm not going to take credit there. So again, full exposure. So what I do with my boys, no different than what I do with my students in terms of just exposing them, right? Planting those seeds. Who knows, one day they might actually pick up a book if someone gifts them a book and they're able to read it.
So be it. You know what, Paul? You just touched upon something. And although I'm a little bit older than you, I think we grew up kind of the same way. You know how I found out about T.S. Eliot? I found out about T.S. Eliot from the Allman Brothers album, Eat a Peach.
Mm-hmm.
Eat a Peach comes from, as you know, a line in T.S. Eliot's J. Alfred Prufrock. I mean, that's how I found out about T.S. Eliot. It's from an Allman Brothers album. Mm-hmm. And so music and reading and sports were all intertwined in my life. And I think in yours as well. There's something about the teamwork of music and sports that are connected, and that's what I got out of it. And, Paul, this is like I was saying, I always wanted to teach a class where I did nothing but the songs, the lyrics of Dylan and Jackson Browne and Neil Young and Van Morrison. I could have taught a whole class on that. It would have been so much fun. You never know, maybe sometime down the road somewhere. But, so what does music mean to you?
That's
a
very profound question. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And I've told you this before. I have zero musical ability. I can't carry a tune. I'm fairly certain I'm tone deaf. I can't sing. I've tried to pick up an instrument, and my fingers just don't work that way. So it's not, my connection with music is definitely not at the level of a musician.
Yeah. I got that.
So in terms of what music means to me, memories, right? There's always an experience. There's always a memory tied to a song and a band, look, my first album as a kid, And I don't know if it was gifted to me or I stole it, but knowing me at the age of 5, I probably stole it. I went into my dad's vinyl collection and I pulled out his copy of Abbey Road.
Oh, geez. What a great way to start.
And it's mine, right? And I put it in my Mickey Mouse turntable record player because I was 5, no judgment. And that whole experience, that whole, even as a 5-year-old, listening to the music and looking at the vinyl cover, pulling out the insert. I don't think I could read at 5, but just kind of looking at the pictures and the lyrics, that's something that unfortunately younger generations today growing up with the way music is consumed don't have. And I think their relationship with music is
tactile feel. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Every Tuesday, leaving campus after practice or after school, making my way over to what unfortunately wasn't a rec store, it was Best Buy. But you make your way over to Best Buy for the album release. You pick up the album that you've been looking for or looking forward to. You're just waiting for that release. And then you've got your evening set, right?
Boom.
You pop that CD, and again, different experience altogether. You pop that CD into the stereo. You prop yourself up on your bed. You pull out the insert. You're reading all of the notes. You're reading, you read the lyrics. You look at the thing. And again, I was just having this conversation with Cody Morrissey up in the teacher's lounge. He made some joke about the Wi-Fi and, it was running today like the 56K modem. I said, yeah, I was old enough for that or young enough, whatever it was. And, as a result of the lack of information at our fingertips as we have now, you learned about new bands there in the late 90s and early 2000s, mostly through the bands that were being shouted out or thank you'd in those inserts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that, and then of course, when you go and catch your favorite band play live, then you're introduced to a whole, mix of characters and bands, and some are good and some aren't. But, that whole experience in itself really opened up, music to me. And, back in the years where I was here in high school, so late 90s, early 2000s, there was a thriving music scene here in Miami. Over at the Grove, there was a great spot, the Chili Pepper. And that's what you did. You're on a Friday and Saturday, you went to the Chili Pepper and you watched bands. Now, granted, at the time, the music was great. You look back, the music maybe not as good, but it was the company, it was the kids, the scene,
the moment.
Yeah. And the best part about it, there was no phones. You were there for the music. You go to shows now. Even some of the more seasoned acts, as you may, too many people are out there with their phones. Instead of just enjoying, the moment. So that's what music, I guess, means to me, right? It's capturing a feeling, capturing a moment. I always found music, and this is weird, I listen to some really heavy stuff at times.
Yeah.
Heavy metal and stuff like that. A guilty pleasure of mine, Slipknot. That
Slipknot guy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Those shows.
Oh, Paul.
A lot of energy. And,
okay.
The part that's surprising, my wife still can't comprehend this. The heavier and the louder and the more intense, the calmer it makes me. I have no issue at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's what's playing in the truck as I come to educate the youth of America.
Hey, as long as it gets you into a rhythm, into a groove, it don't matter.
Right.
Don't matter.
And, what's interesting is as I've gotten older, obviously my tastes vary. I mean, we just had a segment here where we talked briefly about Charlie Parker, Led Zeppelin. You mentioned Jackson Browne, and then there's Slipknot, right? So there's some variety here.
A little bit.
But as you get older, you become more appreciative of bands that maybe you weren't willing to give a listen to when you were young, or in my case, when I was younger. Little Feat. When I was younger, I probably would have just shrugged it off, like, who are these guys? And they're on my Spotify rotation now.
Hey, listen, Waiting for Columbus. Name me a better album than that. Hard to.
Good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Paul, you gave me a great memory when you were talking about, sliding the CD, and I remember dropping the needle on a brand new album and taking that ride, taking that adventure. And it just opened so many doors. And music is a visceral thing. And I think for educators, for whatever reason, listening to music and talking to people, to me, there's a connection there that I built a career out of. And it's cool that we, despite our age difference, we share that. And, you and I have talked enough about music off the air that, I know where you're coming from. It's pretty cool. But Paul, speaking of age difference, yes, Columbus is in a period of transition. You have been taught by, worked with a number of legendary people. And, the road doesn't go on forever. Things do change. And we are in that period. I remember when Dave became principal, he said, in the next 10 years, things are going to change here. And he was absolutely right. And so I think you guys, your age, you're next up. You're the heir apparents. And I think you guys recognize that now. That, no, you're not the 24-year-old buffoon you were when you started teaching. Right. That now it's up to you guys and your ilk to pick up the torch and carry it forward. And it's something that we as the older crowd not only appreciate, but we're counting on.
Yeah, look, before I moved to K14, I was here in the bunker. I shared a classroom space divided by a wall over there in the A building with Fred Foyle.
Yeah.
He was in 826 and I was in 825. And that was back when there was still a door between the two rooms.
A flimsy door, but a door nonetheless. Yeah.
Right. And a door that allowed one of us to watch two classes while the other one went out into the bathroom,
Yeah.
And, and we built a really good relationship. We had a relationship when I was here as a student and, on the football team, he coached, and obviously he was my track coach as well. But working alongside him really fostered that relationship. And, he had this very unique wisdom about him, very Brother Eugene-esque. And I don't think
in his own way. Yes. We're not going to compare Fred and Brother Eugene on an intellectual level, but I know.
But Fred had a wisdom about him that I think at first glance you go, oh, okay. And then 15 minutes later, just kind of explodes. And very much like Brother Eugene, right? And something that Fred always said to me, and it really resonates with me now with everything that's gone on in the last X amount of months, right?
Yeah.
And by far the greatest compliment I received so far in my professional career, and I don't know if it can be topped. He made it a point to constantly say, Paulie, you're old school. And that was it. That's all he would say. You're old school. And it was one of those things like, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was here with Lavelle. I was here back when education was more tactile, a little more hands-on. Actually, a little side note, the first time I ever met you, and I don't know if you know this, because for you, it was a typical Monday, I'm sure. For me, it was my first day on campus as a freshman. I'm leaving B21. I'm walking down the hallway with Mike Lavelle. We're on our way to our math class.
Okay.
And, we're looking down to see where we're going, what room we're going to go to. And before you know it, the two of us were pressed up against the lockers.
Sounds about right.
And as we kind of realized what happened, we make eye contact with the maniac, who looks at us and says, "Good morning, gentlemen. Let's go of us," and continues walking toward the old faculty lounge there at the end of the B building.
Yeah.
We pick up our algebra books, and I go, "Mike, who the hell was that?" He goes, "Oh, that's Coach Lynskey." Oh, okay. So again, there is that definitely an old school aspect. But now that I'm in year 16, and we are experiencing a lot of change.
Yeah.
I came to realize, Fred didn't just say that as a compliment. Fred said that was maybe not the aggressive good morning, but this was a standard. This was an expectation. This was kind of him in so many ways, in a very Fred Foyle way, kind of passing the torch.
To be old school by Fred Foyle, the ultimate compliment, Paul. That's when you know you've made it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said, I don't know if there will be another professional compliment that will ever top that, and I receive a few every so often. But none of them are going to be anywhere near as significant as, again, a very simple phrase, old school. And, again, I spent a lot of time with Brother Eugene. My first couple of years when I was teaching, I was in his classroom. I was in A25, and he was still teaching at the time. He only had maybe one or two philosophy of being classes. And I do feel with a lot of, certainty and expertise that there was a similarity with the Brother Eugene, Fred Foyle wisdom. Those first, for about 2 years there, Brother Eugene taught me Latin when I was teaching here. I never took his Latin class when I was a student, but I was over at FIU working on my master's, and in order to complete my master's, I needed a second language. And I had English under my belt, I think. And Spanish was my first language. That was the first language I ever learned was Spanish. I learned it before English. I don't speak it anymore because my dad couldn't communicate with me. He said no more Spanish, so there was no more of that. And to pass the language requirement in grad school over at FIU, you would have to not only translate a passage from Spanish to English, but then also be able to hold a conversation in Spanish. So the loophole was Latin. All I had to do was translate. I didn't have to speak Latin. So I spent my off periods for 2 years working with Brother Eugene, learning Latin, and some real interesting conversations there with Brother Eugene.
It's a wonderful thing when you can compare and contrast the brilliance of Fred Foyle and Brother Eugene, and to experience both. That's what this school is all about.
Absolutely. And you were talking about, this younger generation. We're no longer the 24-year-old buffoons. We're just grayer and older, but we're still buffoons. We do take that seriously. Not the buffoonery. Well, buffoonery we take seriously, but the upholding that standard, that legacy that you guys kind of showed us, right? So for all the jokes that we rightfully make regarding OB, there's another person there, right? There's another, source of wisdom and kind of doing things the right way. I mean, granted, he's a bit of a Boy Scout in the way he does things, and probably overthinks and worries about things too much.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
there's a lot to be taken from, and again, that list goes on and on. Fred Panzer is another one, right? Another individual who I learned so much from, not only being his student, but also, and it's so weird to say a colleague of his, right? I don't know if any of us are really colleagues of his. We just kind of occupy the same area, and he allows us to breathe the same oxygen. But I don't know if we were ever truly his colleagues.
I know. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's people on this campus who, Fred's retired and, he's doing his thing on the south side of Westchester. There's still people here who are still trying to figure out half the things that Fred said.
Oh yeah, there was always a time delay on what Fred said, and then about 5 minutes later, you figured it out. You're like, oh man, he just insulted me.
In my family lineage.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, Paul, the fact that you guys are ready, willing, and able to pick up the torch, leadership-wise, morale-wise, monetarily, everything that goes into making a school and tradition, keeping the tradition alive. It's going to be fun watching the next few years as it evolves, because you can't. The only constant in life is change, and change for a long time. We were very fortunate, but all good things come to an end, but new things in every beginning in every end there is a beginning. And you guys are going to do just fine. And Paul, we could keep going.
Yeah.
And we will keep going. And you and I love talking about the various topics that mean so much to both of us. But on a personal note, I was so pleased that we kicked off season 3 with you. You have said more, Paul, in these last 2 episodes than I've ever heard you say in the 20 years I've known you, and it's been awesome, and I thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Look, it's weird, right? I don't ever find the need or the desire to walk up to someone in the hallway and share any of this, because why would they want to listen? But you've given me this opportunity. You've asked the right questions, and this has been fantastic, and such a cool experience.
Yeah, man.
It's such a cool experience.
And it's great that the visual aspect. We thank Melissa for allowing this to happen, because it makes a difference when you see people interacting. And so this is very cool. I'm looking forward to continuing in this format. And once again, my friend, you're a true explorer. You've made us all very proud, and continue to do God's work down there in the K building.
Well, it's here anyway.
With the not yet smart, if we will. One way of putting. I got that from Brother Edmund, by the way. The not yet smart.
But Eugene would call us bovines.
There's that. And so we've simplified it to buffoons. All right, Paul. Much love, my brother. It's been great. So, Explorer Nation, I hope you've enjoyed these 2 episodes. I have. They've been great. There's a lot of stuff that Paul and I left out for obvious reasons. We'll give you the rest of the story another time off the air. But until next time, take care of yourselves, support your school, support each other. And until we meet again, Adelante. I'll see you, Paulie.
Take care.